Greetings, everyone, and welcome back, Todd. How are you?
Good. Thirsty. Sorry.
Fantastic. That's always important after the lightning round. Get
Yes.
some fluids in the system.
Exactly. I got to rehydrate.
Absolutely. So thanks for the answers you gave in the lightning round. Really interesting. This whole idea of data engineering. You mentioned in a few of the answers this concept of a pipeline. Can you talk a little bit about what that means when you're designing or maintaining a pipeline?
Sure. So pipeline is fairly self-explanatory. I mean, if you think about a pipeline, in your house, like a water pipeline, it's a contained system that's taking the product of water from, your water heater or wherever to your faucet or your shower. And I mean, a data pipeline is the same thing. You have your sources of data. It could be one, could be many. Usually these days it's definitely many, whether it's, multiple assets in the field that are all generating data and sending them somewhere, or you're picking the data straight from those assets, things of that nature. And then you want to put them in the proverbial sink, if you will. And so you need to build a pipeline that gets your water or your data from all of these sources and puts it into the correct place. And there's definitely different kind of standards for how you may design that. So there's two, acronyms that people use, which are ELT or ETL. And what those stand for is extract, load, transform, or extract, transform, load. And definitely there's shifting thoughts on which way is the best way to do it. But what that essentially means is the E is extract, so you're extracting the water or data from your sources. The T, depending on where you have it, is transform. And then the L is load. Okay. So you're either transforming your data to the necessary format or layout, or changing column data types, and then you're loading it somewhere, or vice versa, depending on what you need.
So Todd, I think you work as a lot of the work you do these days is consulting.
Yes.
So meaning you're probably working with different customers. I imagine, depending on the industry, depending on their business, I imagine the actual data looks pretty different. Is it necessary for you to be any kind of subject matter expert on the nature of the data itself? Like if we were to look at one of the pipelines you're working with, and I pointed to some attribute, are you likely to be an expert on what that means, or you work at kind of a higher level than
that? Expert, no. I'd say a willing to learn, yes. Okay. You can't go into many of my clients and just say, I don't need to know what the data does. Let's just point it somewhere. And I mean, most clients are really understanding. If I come in and I go, I've never worked in the renewable energy field, so I don't know what a lot of this data means. They're very good at pointing out what data means, where it's coming from, where we need to get it. So I'd say, you don't have to be an expert in anything. Obviously, it helps. It helps, right? Like if you have any previous experience.
Super interesting. Okay. Because I think in consulting in general, lots of companies have a different view on that. The kind of, what lots of folks know as verticals. Is it that you need to be a healthcare data engineer versus an energy data engineer, or is the skill set pretty transferable as you go to different industries? Sounds like pretty transferable.
I think the way that companies and teams who are looking for data engineers or even data skills is that the skills you need to work with data, whether it's, even data analyst, data engineer, whatever, those are more difficult to teach on the spot than, this data, comes from a pipeline and it's just tracking the flow of oil and gas or, whatever. So that is more easy to teach someone on the spot than, let's design a pipeline.
Right. Very cool. I asked you this question about a technical skill that is really, really important, and you didn't take any time at all about saying critical thinking. Mm-hmm. So talk to us a little bit about how important critical thinking is in the work that you're doing as a data engineer.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd say, like I said, I think anything technical in this kind of field comes down to how well you can use your critical thinking skills. And I mean, that stems a lot from culturally how I learned math. I had a very good high school math teacher all the way through high school, who was less about this is how you do math than this we're teaching you how to think.
Right.
And that kind of stayed with me. And I think anything you're doing, coding, anything with data, anything with cloud infrastructure, you need to know how to think about the ecosystem as a whole. And that comes with, if I make changes to part A, what's going to happen to parts B, C, and D? And just kind of having that forethought to kind of look past the single item you're working on and how it might affect everything else. And so I think critical thinking comes into a huge play in that. And I mean, when you're designing a pipeline, if it's a simple pipeline, then, critical thinking might not be that important. I'm just taking, literally data from A, I don't have to transform it, and I'm loading it to B.
Right.
Doesn't take a lot of critical thinking to get that done. But more pipelines these days are a heck of a ton more complex than that. And so you could have data coming from, hundreds of sources. You have to do hundreds of transformations, and you have to load them into 100 different places. So you need to know how all that's going to work together. And then, I mean, that it could just be that that's part one of a very long, complex pipeline. You might have to do further transformations and joins to get other data sources and to create views or tables for your business end users. So knowing how all that kind of sticks together is important.
Hey Todd, when you talk about the actual mechanics of building a pipeline, because it might not be clear to people, are we talking about writing kind of custom code that does all that, or are we talking about like there's out of the box software, or a bit of both?
Both, absolutely. It definitely depends on the client, right? You get enterprise softwares, they can be very expensive. So enterprise clients, whatever, they don't mind. They'll pay that cost. But smaller clients, like I have a client who's just like single guy entrepreneur. He's not going to pay for an enterprise software for his one database, right? So it definitely depends. I'd say more things these days are moving to the cloud, which is kind of has the benefit of being enterprise-like, but not as expensive. So, Microsoft Azure is supported by Microsoft. It's for enterprises, but there's no reason that, if you and me wanted to start a company and use cloud data architecture, we couldn't go to Azure and it'd be affordable. So it definitely depends on what the customer wants and needs. But it's usually either way, a bit of both, either writing custom Python or SQL or using some enterprise technology that already exists.
And Todd, most of those technologies, are they things, I mean, if I understood correctly, you did a math program, a bachelor's degree in math. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that all those technologies are things you learn on the job, or is that kind of a requirement to get in a position as a data engineer?
I wouldn't say it's a requirement. It definitely helps. If you go to a company that say, we use Microsoft Azure, and you go, I have Microsoft Azure certificates for all the stuff I've learned, then they'll go, great, because they don't have to teach you that stuff. But I know that's definitely not required. I know people that have gotten jobs based off of just the fact that other people know that they know how to critically think and work out problems, right? Sure. And so that's the hard part, because that is a skill that is not easily taught, like I said before, right? So if you have that foundation of I'm good at solving problems and thinking critical, we can teach you how to use the technology, no problem. I mean, these companies build these technologies so that they're easy to use, right? Sure. The hard part is how do you design the pipeline using that technology?
No, that's super interesting, Todd. In the consulting area, obviously all what you were just talking about would be super important, the technical side of it, and exactly what you were just saying about being able to critically think through problems. Mm-hmm. But what about the people side? In the questions we talked about earlier, you mentioned one thing that surprised you being, and you may be able to put different language around this, but some of the group dynamics. Maybe some people pull their weight more than other people. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about how you navigate that in your everyday work.
I mean, like I said in our lightning round, I mean, in university, it might just be people maybe not even be doing it on purpose. There's people that have different ideas of what is a necessary input to the group's contribution, or people just have 8 classes and they did that to themselves, and your group project is just going to fall by the wayside, unfortunately.
Right.
And the same can be true of the real world and working as well. People can be on projects but still have their regular job, and sometimes the regular job just comes first, and there's not a lot that can be done for projects, and that tends to be the case with people I work with, is that they have a regular job, and then they're helping me either try and automate part of that regular job or enhance it in some way, and so they still have to do that regular job.
Sure.
But and so that leads to maybe some slow responses on their part. But you just have to learn to work with it and not take everything personally. They're not ignoring you on purpose, hopefully. And everyone's trying to get the work done. It's just sometimes it takes a little bit of prodding. And I found having somebody on the client side can help with that. Even if it's just a point of contact that you can bug and say, hey, so-and-so hasn't responded to me. Can you just bug them so that they're later? And usually it's just a case of, I was so busy I forgot. It's like, that's okay. It happens.
Happens to all of us.
Yeah. But that's with all the nice people out there, and I try and be optimistic and say I try and look for the good in people. Sometimes people make it harder than others, but you got to try.
It's more hidden. Yeah.
Yes. So there's also people that are more difficult, and all you can do is and take it on the chin, and just not take things personally, and just try and work with them to get the job done. I've been very fortunate. I think that I haven't had any nasty clients, that almost seem like they're out to get you. Everybody's, I'd say everybody I've worked with has been very, very nice, if not 100% willing.
and anything, Todd, anything really intentional? I guess the first thing I'd say is it may be even surprising to people that a role of a data engineer, even working as a data engineer, that there's so much people interaction. I mean, if you think back to the kind of typical IT work of 25 or 30 years ago, at least what was in all the Dilbert cartoons, like you're pretty much sitting on your own in a cubicle, right?
Yeah.
With tape on your glasses. But the work of a data engineer today, it sounds like you spend tons of time working with other people, right? Lots of people interaction.
Yeah, and I think part of that lends to the fact that I'm a consultant.
Right.
So we could send in the account manager to do all the people talking, but you tend to lose a layer of information there, right? If we send in the account manager, he says, yes, we can do X, Y, and Z for your situation, no problem. And then I get there and I go, problem. We can't do that.
Things get lost in translation.
Yeah. Exactly. And I'm very fortunate in the account managers that I work with are, I wouldn't say natural born technical people, but they're all willing to learn. So, they're less like my dad in the fact that he'll just say, it doesn't work, I don't know. And they'll go, okay, it doesn't work, but help me understand why. And I was like, okay. So that part's good. I'd say probably a traditional data engineer would have less people time, but still some. You still have to talk to business users and people who manage the data sources at their core to get details of where the data is coming from, what format is it in, what do I have to do with it, especially for the business users, right? If they just say, hey, I want you to build this report, and you just say, sorry, I can't talk to you, you're a person, that doesn't work. I need to know the details of it, what do you need, how can I help you, where 100%. Do you want to have it accessible from, right? So there's definitely still a person aspect to it.
Absolutely.
For for a traditional data engineer. I think I just have more time with clients one-on-one because I have that extra layer of being
Yes.
a consultant as well.
Yeah, I think consulting's not a great place to be if you don't like working with people,
Oh no.
right? No, that's interesting. And what you were just saying, it's fascinating. My own observation has been that um, even when I think back to 20 or 25 years ago, what the work was like, you'd have some people that were really really strong technically, but not great in working with people. Not just working with people, but in having the conversations you need to, for example, understand a business requirement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is not just being friendly. There's actually a skill set there, right? And then
Yeah.
you have other people maybe that are not very technical, but they can sit down and document things and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's another example of one of those things where your market value when you can do both, it just goes up by a lot, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not like, oh shoot, we need to put a nice person in front of Todd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Todd can have the conversation with the client, and Todd can also go do it. So
Yeah. I'm a 2-for-1 package there.
Absolutely. I hope you're compensated accordingly.
Yes. I think so.
That's awesome. So one question I always try and ask Todd is, if you were talking to the 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old Todd, that's thinking about a career in technology, thinking about this idea of data engineering, or maybe they're older, maybe there's a lot of that these days where people are considering pivoting their career later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any words of advice that you'd give them in terms of heading towards a career as a data engineer?
Definitely get exposed as early as you can. Whether it's just coding of any sorts or playing with data. There's so many open source data sets. The city of Calgary, for instance, has one completely free to use for anybody. So you can go and find crime statistics for your neighborhood if you want to do something like that. Or I think there's the number of e-scooters that were ridden in the summer, how many rides, how far they went. So you can do a ton of stuff just getting exposed to free open source data. And I'm sure like wherever you live in the world, most cities are getting at least up to speed. So you can, if it's not your city, maybe the next major city over has some sort of open source data set, and just get in there and play with it. Take it, transform it, build some unique reports or anything like that. And then it's not part of my job to build, custom reports and visualizations for people. But the more the better. And it could lead you to something that says, I don't really like building and getting the data to this point, but I love building the visualizations and telling a story with it. And so I think if somebody's even interested in data, I think you should explore the whole kind of ecosystem and atmosphere around it. Because there's such a breadth of experience and just challenges that you could have. And some you'll like and some you won't. So I think understanding more of what you like in that space, if you're interested, and what you don't, is important.
Well, fantastic. Todd, I know you're a busy man. We're stealing your time away from your family on a Monday night. Thank you so much for the time, though.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
I myself have been a data guy for a while, and data engineer is something that's to say it's emerging is probably not doing it justice. It's a very very hot area, and I know you've helped people today understand it a little bit better. And again, we're just trying to help people find that intersection between their passion and what they're going to be successful at, right? So you've helped us understand the way we'd want to be wired. If you don't like puzzles, you need not apply.
Yes. That's or at least be open to the idea that you're going to have to like a different kind of puzzle. Maybe it's just pieces you hate, but at least putting things together.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Todd. Lots more things we can talk about, but we have to have an excuse to bring you back. So thank you very much for the help you provided. I, of course, enjoyed the conversation, but I'm sure this conversation will be a big help to other people. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.